Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. Welcome to your MOCA weekly town hall for January 15th, 2026. My name is Max. With me is Daim and Renee. We are happy to be here with you as always. Well, I think I can speak for everyone and say we're happy to be here with you as always. Renee, Daim, how are we doing? What's up?
Hello. Doing reasonably well in the middle of a nice Canadian snowstorm here in Toronto, but otherwise good.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good
yeah.
as well. Like we had a blizzard last week and in Hamburg.
That's very exciting.
Weather seems to be crazy in different places on Earth right now.
I'm jealous. We had a nice snowstorm about a month ago in New York, unseasonably. Usually we don't get any snow, and if so, it's just like a dusting, and that usually doesn't happen until about February. It was the first time I can remember it snowing in fall in my adult life, so that was very exciting. So I'm excited for you guys. Unfortunately, we have nothing in Brooklyn today but clear blue and cold.
I only see like these like weird reports about freaking shitty ice in the US all across the country.
A different kind of winter.
A different kind of winter.
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect for us to handle.
Let's not start like this. Let's talk about something else.
This is your fault. Yeah, lest I get arrested, maybe we shouldn't talk about ice. That was a joke. We can talk about whatever we want. But I did want to start today, and I mentioned this to Daim before we jumped on. You had sent something very interesting into our group chat from Shaw, the founder and CEO of Eliza OS. And I will read exactly what you sent, which is, or actually I can just put it up here, because I'd love to get your opinion on it now that we actually have an opportunity to talk. So give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. Here is Shaw's Twitter page. Okay, well, it didn't work. I can find it. Do you know what I'm going for, Renee? Here it is. Can you guys see that?
There you go.
Okay, perfect. So Shaw said 2 days ago, I'm tired of this LARP bullshit. I want the decentralized internet I was promised, so let's build it. It will do everything AWS, Cloudflare, and Vercel can do. The fees will go to the app creators and the builders, not me or Labs CO. We'll build the first full stack dApps ever. And I think that that's a lofty goal. And I think that that's really, it sounds to my uneducated ear quite enchanting and exciting. But I was hoping, Renee, that you could at least start us off by giving us the cliff notes on what this kind of thing means. Because I think we are also engaged in building tools towards this. But I was hoping you could just kind of go into like what this looks like on the ground, what maybe it means in more layman's terms, what it means to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty ambitious, pretty crazy, the statement, but I think it is fueled by him as a person who is like 1000% convinced about like the accelerative potential of AI, and like that this technology can enhance builders who have been striving towards that goal that he has been describing. In a way that it is now possible to replicate lots of stuff on the infrastructure level, the routing level, on the whatever, like different protocol levels. But in my opinion, it's nothing new, and especially the Ethereum space and like lots of other open source developers, like from the Linux communities, working on these things for like quite a long time. It's the same narrative, it's the same story. He is obviously Shaw being Shaw, describing crazy high goals, as he usually does, like when he's talking about stuff on X. But like in my opinion, this is something like when he says ElizaOS can do that on their own, I don't think that's the ethos. Like I think it's more about like gathering experts in various that understand the interfaces between the different projects to build decentralized and more like censorship resistant solutions and infrastructure that leverage each other and can over time, due to like their open source nature and the ability for contributors all around the world to join in, and like now everything is viewed with AI agents and the development goes like works more rapid, that this is something that he would love to see. And he obviously wants to see that with ElizaOS at the core, with an agent-centric operating system. But yeah, like I think there are so many other building blocks to this, aside from the agentic infrastructure layer, like the software layer. Like when you need to like have like a coordination layer to who controls the hardware. You need like that kind of like infrastructure. Like I saw the comment of compute, like they also want to help with that.
Use a very ignorant question, but like how, this is very similar to like you said, the general ethos of Ethereum for as long as there's been Ethereum, right? Decentralized tools. I mean, the very fact that there was like, as NFTs were being birthed on the blockchain, like DeFi was already a foundational kind of business ecosystem, right? Decentralized finance. How does something like
the criticism that he has there is that we still host our front ends and the application that tie into the smart contracts on Versal or like another web hosting provider, like SaaS cloud provider. That's something we also need to replace.
Well, I was hoping to make here, because I was curious, like how are centralized ecosystems and entities built on a fundamentally decentralized base? And like, is the answer that would your answer be this kind of like devotion to centralized front end, I don't know what you call it, interfaces? And
yeah, like it's similar to like what IPFS is trying to do for data, that allow like everybody to install like the IPFS software on their computer, on their server, and then replicate the content that they find meaningful enough to be conserved, or for them as like builders, it has the purpose to back up all of these images, these videos, these pieces of content, whatever it is. And that was, like, as we know, heavily utilized from like NFT projects to conserve like their images. And then also like ArtGnome tried to make it more accessible so that the quote unquote average Joe is able to find, like, pay them as a provider to back up the NFTs that they hold in their account additionally, so that they
the IPFS NFTs.
Yeah, like they are not reliant on the project that who launched the NFTs to conserve the media files around the blockchain data sets. And like I totally think that we need to move more in that direction. Like we need to build more stuff like that. And I'd love to see, and then I think that's also something that AI is going to make more easy on the one hand, and then surging hardware prices make it harder on the other hand. What I would like to see more is like people get, or more enthusiasts get into home labbing and build their own servers and help to conserve stuff for themselves and their friends,
so
like or the projects they're involved in.
If you can just interpret that a little bit for me, like how does, in your view, like AI, or how do AI systems kind of, how do they integrate into this in a way which helps
Yeah,
decent?
you can build software way faster.
Mhm.
You could like simplify the deployment scripts of certain server-based applications using AI by like asking, I don't know, Gemini or Cloud Opus to explain how to get this or that running on your machine, and then ask it to like make it run and implement things so that it runs. And like when you have like issues and when you stumble into problems, you have like AI assistants or AI agents who can like, you know, help you either by telling you what to do, or like on the next level doing it for you, because it has access to the terminal and access to your machine, and can like execute the fixes directly in your operating system to make sure that the stuff that doesn't run runs again. And if you assume that not today maybe, but like in 2 years, 3 years, all of this becomes more and more accessible to average consumers, you can just formulate with words what kinds of applications you want to run in your basement or in your living room in a silent mini PC, and host your own version of Google Photos or Apple Photos um, there, and like, you know, be more sovereign about the data that you have. And maybe like additionally host like isolated containers that help the global movement of, you know, decentralization of whatever it is, like IPFS or other things, you know, to use the overheaded hardware that you still have available
Mhm.
to, you know, participate or like to give into this global into whatever global movement you are interested in. And the AI stuff makes it more easy for people, like also for developers, to spend less time on researching how to do it, but just like let the agent do it. Just talk it with words, tell it with words what you want to have, and systems might be able to um, do exactly what you want to do within a day, and then you have like a running system at home. Or let's say you rent a VPS server like on some in some data center, where you have more control over the server. Like you don't need to do that at home, but you can like deploy and run systems in a data center, obviously at scale, and move stuff outside of AWS and outside of these cloud providers into like a um, more sovereign environment where you have more control over what is like hosted, like where is it hosted, who accesses it, because you basically have dedicated server machines there. Like there's a spectrum between cloud and your own server at home where we can move the needle towards when it comes down to like software deployments and you know, who owns what and who serves what.
Mm. So I feel like I've taken a couple things out of that, and stop me if my interpretations are incorrect, but it sounded like, at least what you were saying before, you know, you've been a huge proponent of like kind of home brewing these systems for a long time, ever since you got your tiny box and taught me that that was even a thing that was possible, to like run these, you know, sophisticated AI systems at home on a private server. But it sounds like what you were saying before is like, what we need are people to be building these pipelines, these like established AI pipelines, or integrating these AI into systems that then we can pull from and then apply them to our own systems, right? In a way, they're already experienced with the systems, they're already these I don't know the technical terminology, but I guess I'll just keep using the same words. Like the same pipelines would be applicable in all these different circumstances, and so the ease, the rapidity would just be exponentially quicker, because you're not building kind of a bot from the ground up. You're not building, like, you're not following a system from the ground up. You're kind of like porting something open source that exists elsewhere. And that sounds a lot like, and my experience with this is limited, of course, but that sounds a lot like what we were doing at the beginning of Art Deco's Daim, when we were playing around with the Comfy UI interface. We were kind of taking these various like stable diffusion pipelines and plugging them into a Comfy UI interface, and then like manipulating them from there. Do you still use that when you're like building apps for the Vibe Studio or experimenting on your own with art? Like, are you like kind of established pipelines, or are you building your own kind of from the ground up? Like,
So
used to these things.
yeah, I see what you're saying, and I think definitely I think the term might be composability, sort of the ease of bringing different components together and sort of tie and chain them together into greater useful wholes and useful workflows is the thing. Comfy UI, it's, I will say that, obviously it's sort of more or less the same pipeline or the same workflow that we used for the honorary generations. So it definitely got quite a bit of reuse for that. And now that I'm working on the Decos in the Void Brick Breaker game, I'm actually considering possibly using that same workflow again for certain yet to be revealed gameplay elements. So definitely it's something that that has kept giving, but I would say, Comfy UI in its own weird way is actually probably not what I would say is not something I would say is great at composability, because as someone that sort of has done a lot of work where Comfy UI is part of the automation, it's often not straightforward. It's often not very easy, and Comfy UI has in it a lot of assumptions about being used by a human being that's sitting in front of, the keyboard and the screen right now, and is, watching and is able to make decisions in the moment. And the minute you're trying to sort of abstract away stuff from those assumptions, you can do it, but it's not entirely straightforward. And especially due to how diverse the ecosystem of nodes and like add-ons and extensions is, even aside from the core, there's a lot of nodes that seem to be written with, assumptions that just fundamentally make them hostile to, automation and like sort of headless non-manual use. But, on the other hand, I think Ethereum and like blockchains in general, and, stuff like IPFS, on the other hand, are incredibly good examples of what composability can do. The way that we can bring together, IPFS or, similar sort of decentralized storage and, blockchain records to create NFTs, like that's something incredible that is foundational to now a whole new class of things, of entities, of ownable digital objects. And I think sort of like Shaw is hinting at, and as Renee was explaining, If we can strengthen and sort of expand the role and the use and the utility and the usefulness and the reliability and responsiveness of IPFS-like components, because IPFS, for all that's great about it, definitely has its downsides. That could do a lot to strengthen the decentralization, the genuine decentralization and genuine censorship resistance and all that good stuff of things built on Ethereum and beyond.
I wanted to ask this before, but I'm trying to like piece together everything you guys have been saying. And the assumption of an IPFS is that like the reason that there needs to be an IPFS is because it's too troublesome in terms of effort. It's too expensive to actually like link files directly to the blockchain, right? And so you have these kind of like secondary applications arise to solve a problem, right?
Sorry, if I can correct slightly. So the idea of IPFS is, I don't think it's so much about troublesomeness. I think it's about, it is primarily about decentralization and longevity with, sort of caveats in there. But in a perfect world, if you upload something to IPFS, then, and that something is something that continues to be in demand, then sort of its availability and accessibility is effectively a solved problem. Because the way IPFS works, something that keeps being requested is never going to disappear from that network accidentally. Whereas if you host that same thing on your web host, then there's a whole bunch of things that are in question. Is your domain name going to stay the same? Is your web host online? Is your web host getting perhaps botted by something that renders it temporarily unresponsive? Are you going to get DNS blocked by the United States or whatever else? IPFS arguably avoids these issues. Again, it's not perfect, and there certainly are other issues, especially for low demand stuff, but that's sort of the role that IPFS is meant to play. It's meant to be a protocol onto which you can upload a file once, and as long as there continues to be demand for it, basically sort of guarantee its continued availability without having to do anything else, without having to renew domain names, without having to pay a web host on a monthly basis, without having to do anything. As long as people keep asking for that file, IPFS is going to keep hosting it and going to keep providing it.
And also, like, what I would like to add is that let's assume a file is offline because it wasn't in demand and it hasn't been pinned by someone who thinks it's important. So it's offline from the IPFS network. And if you upload the same file, like, no matter how you renamed the file on your computer, but if someone on planet Earth has this file still, like the image still on their computer that loaded into IPFS again, then it's going to like repopulate on the network, and all the links that were like pointing to that file are being like revived. Because when you upload a file to IPFS, it will always have the same hash. So you can re-upload the file 10 years later. And
anyone can, right?
Anyone
That's
can.
the beauty.
That's totally different from the issues that Daim described, like when a link points to like a domain that's not owned by an entity anymore who cares about the file, when you don't remember exactly how that file was named. Like all these things are being solved by IPFS.
So why is there so much
many?
Like, why is there so much exaltation every time a project links directly to the blockchain or is minted directly on the blockchain? If IPS is providing a service like that, like,
it's a fetish.
Yeah, for
That's a fair
sure.
answer, I guess.
I mean, like talking about like on-chain stuff on Ethereum, I think it's valid to say that Ethereum as a blockchain, as the second biggest blockchain on planet Earth, with all the financial incentives around it and the decentralization it has, the chances are very, very high that that chain is still hosted, especially now that institutional players come in, and the data that has been written to to Ethereum will be available in the future.
Mhm.
And that is like a higher guarantee for data security compared to like IPFS and the issues that you have, because for IPFS you still, especially as Naeem said, when the files are in low demand, usually when you open, for example, our Deco Explorer, like we don't show the direct IPFS high resolution files because the application wouldn't load. Like we have like thumbnails there, we have optimized file sizes there, and the raw IPFS Art Deco files, they are only being accessed when somebody clicks the button like download the file, full resolution file from IPFS, like to save traffic, to enrich the user experience by loading the page faster, and all of these reasons.
Mm.
So the fact that we are building, or that everybody should build web applications like this so that the user has like a pleasant experience, on the other side leads to the fact that these Art Deco files are not in high demand from the application layer, because our API don't serve the like massive the 4K files, but we as a project see ourselves in a responsibility to save the files, to secure the files on our own IPFS node. We have like a torrent file with all the images. So we, as like a cultural institution who cares about the assets that we have like brought into life, we can pretty safely say that IPFS is like cool for us, like, because we are in this for the long term. But an investor for like a shit NFT shitcoin that is launched by I don't know, like idiots who just like want to make a quick buck, who
Yeah.
do not care about these things, they will not keep their IPFS node online to secure their 10,000 files. They will give shit, take it offline if nobody else takes that responsibilities. Of course, the links will be depopulated from IPFS and offline as if they've never existed.
Mhm. Is it
That's the
resource
issue.
expensive to keep an IPFS node online?
Yeah, like somebody needs to, have a computer connected to the internet and needs to like have the files on that hard disk, on the it's like a flash disk, NVMe SSD stick.
Or at the very least, have it pinned through, a third-party service, right?
Yeah, but that third-party service has a computer on the internet where the
Yeah.
files are stored.
So then
Somebody
that
needs to store
becomes,
the
yeah,
files, And
yeah.
with Ethereum, it's the same. Like somebody needs to host and provide the blockchain data, which is data on a computer,
I
which
mean,
we call Ethereum nodes.
is this a blockchain problem? Like, does a better, or maybe the better
It's
word,
a physics problem.
but does
I
like
mean,
a
you need to.
newer blockchain, right, or a blockchain with like modern advancements integrated?
Yeah, but if nobody hosts that blockchain, the data is gone.
Yeah. It's not a blockchain problem. It's basically it's a decentralization and permanence problem, and it feels like it's coming up more in a blockchain context because, of course, blockchains are all about, like decentralization and longevity and permanence and all that. But really, it's about the fact that the default internet is a highly transient thing.
Mhm.
If you stop hosting your website, it's gone as of tomorrow. And maybe archive.org crawled it once, and something of it will remain. But you know what? If it didn't, or even if it did, and the next guy that gets your domain put some other shit on there and, does something that makes archive.org decide to, not be willing to serve the old content, then
Yeah,
it's
like
all
I
gone.
think I saw that archive.org, I think it was like Q4 last year. The US government said it's so important that they want to take over control. Like it's like a church building somewhere in the US where like a
A
couple
national
of
historic site.
ultra freaks, have built like massive server racks and like stored all of these Wayback Machine stuff and like trying to like conserve like the history of the internet. It's like a pretty impressive story to watch a documentary about that. Super, super interesting how they are doing what they do. And now the US government like tries to take control over that, and there are then different incentives and what what is kept, what isn't kept. If those decisions are being made by a government with whatever intentions and goals compared to somebody who says like everything as much as possible should be kept, then obviously that's going to have an impact on how archive.org is going to develop in the next years,
Yeah.
which might be a problem for I think from what I understand, the most important backup or public backup of the internet that we have on this planet.
Intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a documentary on it, or were you saying that you would like to see a documentary on it?
I think there are multiple ones.
Mm.
I'll like do a quick research and then send some in our WhatsApp.
So is the ideal, like the decentralization that we were talking about at the very outset of this town hall, right? That Shaw is looking for, right? Is something like IPFS a necessary part of it, or is it like an impediment?
I mean, something like IPFS is a necessary part of it. I think part of Shaw's frustration, I would say probably indirectly, comes from the fact that IPFS's sort of limitations and downsides mean that you can't really have a decentralized app that uses only the blockchain and only IPFS.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, you still need, stuff that is tied to these centralized access points that are going to be the majority of users' only straightforward way of accessing that service or that, whatever it is. And that thing is vulnerable to, all the things that non-decentralized and non-censorship resistant things are vulnerable to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he wants to see the whole stack, like from the data center infrastructure to the application layer to become more decentralized. And I mean, it's super ambitious, but if in the end it's a lot about like pooling capital, about pooling pooling capacities, and in the end also responsibilities,
It's
like
also
DAOs or something. But like in the end, like also DAOs haven't been like truly solved was from a
Yeah.
governance perspective. So right now I think, but then again, like with AI, and that's a promise of AI, like you could maybe have like DAO governance become more feasible because you have like an AI executing the decisions, and you have like the agents with like preferences and an understanding of each token holder voting in the DAO automatically while the humans are sleeping, and you only see the reports, and then stuff like this becomes again more feasible because of AI. Um, but in the end, you would need, like, for the full vision, you would need to build physical data centers that are owned by DAOs
mm-hmm.
with hardware inside of that owned by the by the not corporation, but like the constellation of shareholders in that DAO. And then inside that data center, like projects or other DAOs would deploy their software. And that is then also like revenues from that is shared amongst the
Yeah.
shareholders of those DAOs. And I think like the data center thing, like building a physical data center, that stuff is obviously going to happen on scale, at least. Like maybe we see an experiment for stuff like this in a small scale, but that's going to happen at the later stage. But something that could happen now is like you rent dedicated servers in an existing data center, you have redundancy across different other data centers, and you have like load balancing for an application that you deploy across those data centers, so that you have like a service that you provide. You have control about like the routing and stuff as much as you can get, um, and then you share the revenue streams from that into the participants of the co-ownership shareholders of the DAO that run the application that we just like as an example took. But then again, something like compute AI is like an orchestration layer for computation, like for AI computation, which can be plugged into the different applications that are deployed by different DAOs and the agents that are fueled and running for different participants of different DAOs. And that is something that Shaw wants to see, like a more decentralization among the deployment, among the value flow, among the value capture on every different layer, from the application down to the bare metal of
Yeah.
computer hardware. And even like infrastructure, cable and networking that connects different countries and inside the countries, different data centers, and the homes where the people live, like all of that in a utopian world that is truly like libertarian and cypherpunk, like all of that would be owned by certain organizations, where like the individual person can own a share in all of them and participate in the value creation on any layer, on any level
Yeah.
of the stack.
Yeah, and I feel like the ultimate end result, if something like this is successful, is the creation of another sort of public good, like Ethereum, like IPFS, that that becomes foundational to things that just can't be done without it. And
The things, like, in theory, right, in your mutual visions, would be impossible without something like this. If that,
sorry, what are you asking?
like you said that there will be like applications or processes that are impossible without a system like this. Like what might those look like?
I mean, the big thing that Shaw's post was talking about was, having the ability to, I forget how he put it, but basically being able to get value from the work that you put in, from the services you provide in a meaningful way. So, how we always talk about how difficult it is to do anything in crypto that is financially viable and sustainable.
Uh-huh.
So, if we were, less reliant on all these different, third-party services and providers, then probably that value proposition would look very different, and things would become easier to get to a point of at least sustainability.
Makes sense. Right. Also, like, there's also like required of this is like a cultural shift, right? The same way that I guess it's more of like a putting money where one's mouth is, in the sense that, like, as we've discussed a million times, there's so much, especially from like high profile KOL types, these pronouncements about the necessity of self sovereignty and decentralization individual ownership and so on and so forth, and yet
Yeah.
very little.
I mean, 90% of that is
Yes.
LARPing for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly. It's almost all lip service. However, there's an opportunity, I think, similarly to how the ecosystem was even when I was early in crypto art and kind of this whole ecosystem. Like people would move their attention, move their funds, move their activities to places that really were more kind of like in line with their ethos in this case. That ethos has more or less been lost, whether by necessity or by desperation. So there needs to be a cultural shift, on the ground of where consumers are actually going to put their time, put their energy, put their money. And obviously that's just a way of supporting what you were saying, Daim. Like the best way to do that is to give people like an actual financial stake in the product, which I think is what a lot of
Yeah.
the discussion, our discussion, lots of external discussion about like the decentralized voting, governance tokens, etc., give people a stake in what they're actually like investing in, essentially um, let them control or have some kind of a substantial say in the direction of a company or an organization, the DAO ecosystem, whether in its like fully formed form or in just
Yeah.
kind of stolen pieces of the DAO ecosystem and then transplant onto projects. Like that was the idea of like super rare token. Was like making large scale decisions about or helping to make large scale decisions about like the direction of a company or even just provide information to a given organization about where their community
Right.
wants them to go. Um,
But also the other thing too is just again that idea of again becoming potentially sort of like a third pillar to the Ethereum IPFS. Well, currently not trifecta, but if there comes to be a trifecta where
Bifecta.
there's these three decentralized technologies that you can use and use those and nothing else to make something that today requires heavy reliance on like centralized third party value extractive actors.
Mhm.
Like that's going to be a huge game changer because right now, to give you like simple and like crypto art focused example, um, all the fancy ass, innovative uh, chain on chain like interactive and on chain responsive projects, like that shit is like what do you call it? It's duct taped together from like so many different parts, and most of the parts are like third party providers and stuff that is going to become obsolete or literally unavailable one way or another. And like all these things, it's just a matter of time before they will break.
Mhm.
And the best you can hope for is that the artist or the organization behind them had some damn sense and made sure that when they break, because again it's not an if, it's a when they break, they will break in a way that what's left still feels like it has value.
Sure.
Whereas if you have again a trifecta of these public good um, services that you can rely on and take it for granted that shit is going to uh, a still be there, b continue working, not just 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, but 50 years or 100 years after you're dead. Like that completely changes the range of possibilities, and it takes things like it takes things that currently have long-term vision that are digital, which honestly, I, as a programmer who has some insight into how these things work, I can never take anyone seriously that suggests that some long-term project is you know has like a meaningful life beyond perhaps a decade or two, because there's so many factors against that becoming a reality.
Mhm.
But if you could actually have faith that something digital could survive and continue to work indefinitely. Like these projects would genuinely, end up having like a whole different degree of significance, both artistically and utility wise.
Can you give me an example of like something within our ecosystem where like I don't know, something has either lost relevance or become obsolete or, gone away altogether that has like had a negative impact on the community? Just like an example of what you're talking about so I can better glean the effects.
Uh,
Something off the top of your head,
I,
perhaps?
I don't know if I can give you something off the top of my head, because more often than not, projects like that tend to leave me fairly unexcited, and I don't tend to follow stuff. But I mean, basically anything that involve. Oh, sorry. Yes, I can. Async art.
Mm.
Async art. If async art had that third leg, that basically would have sort of filled in the blank between Ethereum and IPFS, with no reliance on traditional domains and traditional websites, then all the async shit would still be functioning
Yeah.
exactly the same way that it was when it was launched.
Mm-hmm. This is not 100% related, so bear with me. But I'm thinking about like governance tokens and as a method of, as you said, async art, and I was thinking about just before they shuttered the release of I think it was Final Supper was the name of the project, or Last Supper, or
Yeah, something like that.
Forever Supper rather. Which was an homage to the first piece mint on the platform, First Supper, which was this collection of all these crypto artists and all of their aesthetics all together into one piece. But Forever Supper was like you would buy these individual kind of aspects, these individual kind of like artworks or uh, I guess aspects is the best way to say them, and you would kind of combine them into a single composition.
Yes.
The idea being to give individuals more ownership in the company, right? You'd continue to come back, but you would continue to own like an important asset. And this was kind of like, it wasn't a governance token per se, but it was like the a continuing measure of the platform's value codified in an NFT. And the whole idea of like a governance token is that like you're going to have a reason to hold a token as the price goes up, and you're going to have an investment in the institution that you're governing. But I don't know. It is kind of silly that, like, in order to capture the value of a company that you've invested in, either by a governance token or elsewhere, that you would need to then give up your ownership stake. Now, I know that's how like traditional stocks work, but maybe there's like a decentralized solution here. Maybe part of this is like a way to capture value within an institution.
I mean, the known origin guy, I forget his name, was posting something that sounded vaguely like what you're talking about now,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
Yeah, Fluxer app.
Yeah, some service of some sort. That's
Yeah, let me bring that up here. I can do that.
Now, I confess, what I read, I don't fully understand how that will work or how that would work, but I'm assuming that they put more thought into it than I have. So I'm very curious how they'll approach things when it launches.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know. It's interesting that like we've talked a lot about the organizational infrastructure, not just of a given project, but of like the ecosystem around it, in order to get people invested in or receiving value from the ecosystem as it grows, right? Capturing the value as it grows in a way which does not necessarily force somebody to leave the project or leave the ecosystem in order to capture that value. Which I think is the whole idea of like staking rewards, right? Is that like you're going to hold, the longer you hold, the more you're going to capture your value. Although I don't know if that is always the best term, because if you look at something like USDC or Ethereum, where like you're getting staking rewards from holding up validators, like it takes a decade in order to capture or to capture the same value that you would be getting if you were just to sell the price of the Ethereum at whatever point it's at. But the idea that you could be useful within these networks as if you're like actually a part of the organization where its value rising commensurately leads to you capturing a commensurate part of that value without necessarily having to extricate yourself from the investment, I think is interesting. And that's probably the most that's probably where the cultural shift needs to come from, right? Or probably that's rather the aspect of the decentralized ecosystem that is going to be most convincing and persuasive to people who are not currently engaged in that ecosystem, that they can capture value whilst being involved with the ecosystem, as opposed to this kind of like in or out binary dichotomy that we have now. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean that certainly sounds good to me. It's preferable to as you're saying, either you're in or you get some value, but not both. Like that's a shitty choice unless you own enough tokens that you can basically do both.
Yeah, I don't know. This is not a fully fleshed out thought, and it was kind of more of an addendum to the conversation that we were having, as opposed to.
But I mean, clearly it's part of the zeitgeist because, again, former known origin heads seem to be working on something like that.
I mean, you look at like all of the rather manic epochs of the crypto ecosystem, and even like the DeFi period before I was involved in the NFT ecosystem, like so much of it was based on kind of what I'm talking about. Like it wasn't, I remember in the Solana NFT zeitgeist of like 2021, it wasn't just that you would like own an asset and the price would go up. It's that you would own an asset and it would give you things. Like that was the whole idea of like the roadmap, right? Like the whole idea of like the Bored Ape Yacht Club roadmap was that you would hold a Bored Ape, and then just by holding it, you would get commensurate value on top of that, right? You wouldn't have to remove yourself from the ecosystem in order to capture.
Right.
It would give you more. They would give you the mutant apes. They would give you this. They would give you that. There would be some kind of value just of being involved that didn't necessarily require you to run away, right? Dividends in a sense.
Yeah.
And I guess for projects and for DAOs and for governance tokens, like, I remember what was it? It was Pranksy. That was probably like 2 or 3 months ago. The House of Pranksy idea that you would buy this NFT and you would be involved in this kind of Discord server, this gated Discord server where you would get all these kind of like extra value adds. But the value add was only really access. There was never access to information, access to people, access to alpha. But there was never any hard and fast like recompense coming from that.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the kind of, I don't know, that seems to be the kind of, what's the word? Performative value add offered by a lot of these DAOs and projects, right? Is that like you will get these whitelists, you'll get these allow lists, you'll get these opportunities for an airdrop or whatever. But the key to this, I do think might be as a project increases in its value and its cultural footprint, et cetera, that people who are invested in it, not on like a Series A level, not on like a VC level, but just like bought into the project, are able to capture the value of its growth, which I don't think could ever happen in a centralized ecosystem, because it will always be in the centralized organization's interest to diminish the amount of recompense that is going to its constituents, as opposed to capturing that recompense itself. So unless like the ecosystem itself or the system itself is providing rewards, and the system itself does not require those rewards, I wonder if this can even happen, right? Shaw talks about like creating all these apps to compete with Cloudflare and Versal and things like that. But I think the incentive structure is what's really kind of most important here. Like the apps built on top of it almost are not. It's not that they don't matter, but they're kind of interchangeable. If that incentive structure can be like properly put, properly established. I wonder. I don't know how AI works in that system. Although an AI agent would not need the recompense that a human-centric centralized node would require. Now I'm using way too many words.
Yeah, no, but I get what you're trying to say. Yeah, I think when we get to a point that there's infrastructure enough for AI agents or AI systems to sort of be self-sustaining within a public good infrastructure, like, I think that'll be interesting. I think lots of, I don't know, lots of wooden shoe flinging folks out there think that that's basically a description of the apocalypse. I think that that's, the point where we can potentially set up services or systems or organizations where, we basically get to set up a genuinely neutral or like sort of aligned as required or aligned as defined by us arbiter to manage it, that again might be a better way to handle certain sort of things. There's of course like AI prompt injections and other things to concern ourselves with, but I think to suggest that that stuff is going to be a showstopper is ridiculous, given how much the technology has advanced in the past few years. Given that there's so much research moving in every different direction, I think it will be possible eventually to set up, again, whether services or organizations, where the part that previously might have non-negotiably required human attention and human action and human consideration and human thought can actually be handled fully by an AI. And again, if that AI can actually fully run on some sort of purely and fully public good infrastructure, then like very limited microtransaction fees might literally be able to just sustain its like inference needs. And again, that too would be like, I think potentially a big step forward, and again maybe a partial answer to some of the issues that DAOs experienced trying to do things the way that they've traditionally been done.
Look at that, a little clear-eyed optimism to end our podcast today, or our town hall. This was fun. As usual, I'm impressed and a bit intimidated by all of your technical know-how, and a bit disappointed by my hard-headedness when it comes to internalizing what you guys are talking about. But Daim and Renee, thank you both so much for your insight and for being here as always. Thank you, Hiram, for hanging out in our chat for at least a moment. We'll be back soon with another MOCA Weekly Town Hall, so we will see all of you soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being with us. And gentlemen, until we meet again.